And who was the president of the Bank of the United States? Yeah, what did he do after Jackson pulled the money out of the out of the Bank of the United States, put it in pet banks? What did he do? Yeah. For what? Yeah. He was going to show everyone how important the bank was, but he showed how in private hands they could manipulate the money supply for their own personal gains, creating deflation. And that's going to trigger what happened in 1837? What fun economic thing? And who they would soon call, who was elected president in 1836? Yeah, Van Ruin for Van Buren. Van Ruin's depression. And nobody really knew what to do. Also, what animal represents democracy, and you should wear one on your head?
Cats.
Yeah, obviously cats. So, we got industrial. This is where we quit, wasn't it?
Yes.
Did you guys look at the wheel?
Yes.
Who missed the rug? Did you see the rug on your way in? Pretty cool, huh? Everyone take a peek at the rug. All right, manufacturing pre-capitalism. This is our world that's being created. All the good and bad elements of it. So, before capitalism, before the Industrial Revolution happened, it was cottage industry. It was done in people's homes. And skilled craftsmen. And they were paid based upon their skill and experience. Did some of the most important jobs, and they're the ones that will be replaced by the machines. And people had to be self-sufficient. You had to know how to make most things you use, or if you were going to buy it from somebody else, it had to be in basically within sight. And you had to be incredibly intelligent and incredibly talented to survive in this world. So, part of it was most people were they were their own boss. And they decided when they worked and how hard they worked. Yeah, even if they were working for somebody, they still had that power. I'm not saying it was easy, but that measure of self-sufficiency, that simply does not exist. Why? The Industrial Revolution. So that's before, is that a dog or a cat? I think it's more doggish, doesn't it? That's an X.
It's a lot bigger, and you can see that shear's claw.
And it's marked by an X. So let's get to the factors of industrial growth. The factors of industrial growth. And there's a lot of factors. Britain. It all started in Britain with the textile mills. And so Britain would have a head start on everybody. Britain is still living on the wealth, despite the fact that their nation's kind of in shambles right now. They are still incredibly wealthy. And there's going to be lots of pictures of London Bridge, paintings of it, with these new coal-fired steam engines that would be right on the Thames River. You'd always put these factories and everything on the Thames, so you dump everything in the river. So rivers would be cesspools. And this is one of my favorite artists, Claude Monet, and he would make this painting of London Bridge. He was there just kind of in awe of this impressionist, one of the founders of the School of Impressionism, my favorite type of art. And when I was in Chicago this summer in August, Chicago Museum of Art, they had that painting. And I forgot it was there, so I was so happy. There's me telling you of my little bit of happiness in Chicago. But, anybody know where London Bridge is today? They took it off, brick by brick, and moved it. Does anyone know where? Yes. Huh? No, but it's in the U.S. Arizona. Lake Havasu, Arizona. London Bridge is there. Yes. Somebody with clearly too much money bought it, and they moved it brick by brick and rebuilt it in western Arizona. Have you been there? Yeah. Yeah. So London Bridge is there. What? Yeah, it's really weird. And especially a bridge in a desert, on an artificial, based on an artificial canal. Yeah. So, and it began there. They have this head start. How did the U.S. get into it? Well, sure. Remember, Hamilton wanted this, but it was that War of 1812. Remember, it started with Jefferson's embargo all the way through the British blockade, and that is a engraving of the British ships of the line in Portsmouth. This blockade, the United States couldn't get those textiles, and that would encourage. This is what you have to have. Would encourage American production. They couldn't buy the stuff, but people were becoming addicted to it. It's a heck of a lot easier. It's a heck of a lot easier to buy a roll of cloth than make it yourself, for obvious reasons. And then 3, the transportation revolution. And I can't emphasize the transportation revolution enough. This, in a way, it's its own revolution. It's tied in with the Industrial Revolution. They go hand in hand, and they would radically change everything. First off, there's a guy riding a horse. This was horse racing an American steam locomotive. But this map is really telling. This is the number of days it takes to ship goods from New York anyplace else. So that's how far one day. Think about it, in 1800, the world moved at 3 miles an hour. That's why you had to be self-sufficient. It took so long to ship anything, and for that matter, it's so expensive. So you remember the Whiskey Rebellion, it's going to be a week to get goods from western Pennsylvania to the coast. That's why a week, and therefore really expensive. Whiskey was a way to at least maximize your profits. And that goes back to the whiskey tax and all that. So, I mean, it's 6 weeks to get from New York to Chicago. Well, what's going to become Chicago. And basically, except for a few items that almost are like luxuries and maybe a few people had enough money to afford, you had to make everything yourself. Never underestimate how intelligent people back then were. Significantly more intelligent overall than us. They could do everything. We can't do anything. Seriously, what can we do? People bring us food, right? We get into a car and hopefully it turns on. If it doesn't, oh no. Computer, your phone, yeah, fix it. It works. We can't do anything. They could do everything. They just had to know everything too. I'm not saying we're not smart. We just don't have to know anything. That's a real issue. Back to this. So, there are 3 elements of the transportation revolution. Roads. Oh, one more thing too. Their memory back then was probably 20 or 30 times better. Maybe more. My memory is significantly better. Not because I'm smart, just because things were different. I didn't know. I couldn't look it up. It doesn't mean I'm smart. But it is nice. Yes. Huh? I will. But back to this. No, I can't. But roads, the national road. Here is one road, and remember we talked about this before. There'll be a few other roads, Natchez Chase, and Trace, a few other, but the roads, they're really expensive, took a long time to make. So most of them were, this is a turnpike or a toll road. And a few of them would make, and people would try to profit from those. They would try to profit from those roads. And the thing about it is, where would you build them? If you're going to make money off a road, they're only going to connect big cities. They're only going to go like to New York to Philadelphia, Philadelphia to Boston. And so, here is an actual bridge. This is Lancaster, Pennsylvania, the first turnpike, and this is the first permanent standing bridge. It's still used today. I was driving down the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and I pulled over and stopped and took a picture of this first bridge. It's part of the Park Service. It's pretty cool. And they can only make so many, and you think about it for a second, everything had to be pulled. This is a Conestoga wagon. By definition, they're going to be very narrow gauge distance between the wheels. It's not going to haul very much, and it's going to be very slow. But they will make 10,000 miles, not very many miles of roads. There's going to be very few roads, nothing more than ruts, all the way up until the 20th century. All the roads we see here today are basically teens, and mostly started in the 1920s. And then the New Deal really started picking up and building roads. But 10,000 miles of roads were constructed between 1800 and 1850. A ton mile is the amount it costs to ship goods the amount it costs to ship a ton of goods 1 mile. Don't try to relate today's dollars to back then. There's been a significant amount of inflation. And don't forget, we still have hard money and currency, everything's messed up. But approximately 15 cents a ton mile. It dropped by 50% by road, but that's still really expensive. Today, road transport is still the most expensive way to transport goods, but it's also very flexible. The federal government has built a lot of roads. So, next, canals. Canals were done, yes, there's some private ones, but here's the biggie, state aid. State aid. Taxpayer money from the states help build this. A little bit of federal in a few places. Remember I told you about there's a different problem with federal and state. But 3,700 miles were built in the first 50 years of the 20th century, or 19th century. And you'll see just massive amounts of canals made all over Britain and all over France or Germany. All these canals were built. Germany a little bit after this. There's no Germany quite yet, but they started the Industrial Revolution a little bit after the United States. France did too. Britain started building them. No coincidence that also they started finding all these fossils. Darwin's not far away. The Industrial Revolution caused that too. And by 1830, you could go by water from New York all the way to Ohio. It's all connected by water. Slow, but you can make it. And Lake Erie really would be this kind of highway because it spreads all the way across Ohio and you connect this way. Cincinnati, here. And eventually you have a canal and they connect up to Chicago. And you notice it's a penny a ton mile. To this day, water is by far the most efficient and cheapest way to transport. Yeah. The amount of cost is to ship the amount of cost to ship a ton of goods 1 mile. But like today, the big container ships are significantly cheaper than shipping by road, especially. And the most famous, the Erie Canal. State aid, a little federal aid, but the Erie Canal would be the most famous. It would help stimulate New York economic growth. By tying New York to Lake Erie would help cement New York as the most important industrial and financial center in the United States, up the Hudson. And in fact, the Hudson is a tidal estuary all the way up almost to Albany. It still has tides all the way up to here, which is pretty wild if you think about it. So it's a massive river, so you can navigate all the way up to here and then across to Buffalo. Buffalo wasn't even really anything there. We've become an important city because of this. And all these sub-canals, and it would take 8 years to build, basically by hand. And it was big enough to have 2 keel boats go side by side. Eventually, they'd have boats that would fit exactly the right width and have like little pull-outs for them. We can see a little keel boat here. A lot cheaper. The water can take the weight. And as long as you have water, droughts are a problem on canals, obviously. You can haul goods cheaply. You see the mules pulling it on the side. And so every canal has got to be flat, except for the locks for it to go up or down, which are locks or things. But it's always flat. And so along canals are some of the most popular today hiking areas. It is a big deal for people to hike a lake or an Erie Canal. And then they'll have boats on the canal, and you'll sleep in the boat on the canal and hike it. Like the C&O over the best hiking I've ever been was the C&O Canal over the Appalachian Mountains because it's flat. You got mountains all over, but you're staying flat. I like the flat part. Got me. Okay, so moving on. And you'll see this. I love this picture. Especially, look at that pig. That's a pig. That's a pig. Were we passing notes around?
I drew.
Huh?
I drew costs.
Wow. Okay. Save that, we'll frame it. So, steamboats, no coincidence right here. Think about it now, going upriver or without wind. Steamboats. And Britain was working on this steamboat, but the problem was to make a steam engine big enough that where I'll show you the cylinder that had the steam, they would explode all the time, which is bad for crew morale. But the Claremont, nobody thought it would work. They thought it would be too dangerous. The steam engine, the Claremont could function. You notice it still has sails because they wanted an extra wind power, but now they could go upriver, they could go without wind, and with that power, they could go away from wood boats. Iron and then steel hulls, significantly more durable, can haul so many more goods. And so back to the pig. Have you noticed the pig? Remember what I told you about how they would draw portraits of people? Because he's in his 40s and they painted that. He looks about 13. So by 1850, the green are the major canals, the red are the major roads, and then the dark blue are rivers that can navigate. You notice there's a lot of rivers in the south. The south is going to be way behind. This would be crucial in like 1861 or so. I don't know. So by 1830, because of the steamboat, okay, a little bit faster. Yeah, kind of, right? And not only 3 weeks, it's a little bit more than half of the time to get to the tiny little town of Chicago, or the bigger town of Cincinnati, Cleveland, St. Louis. But still, very slow. People still had to be self-sufficient for the most part. Goods can be shipped. Jumping right to this. And now the big element of the transportation revolution were railroads. Railroads would change the world. Not only because they would ship goods faster, more flexible, but here's the big thing. Railroads themselves were an industry. Virtually everything the Industrial Revolution made would be bought by the railroads for the first 50 years of the railroads. The railroads are transportation and industry tied together. So here is the first workable steam engine. I'll show you a picture of it in just a second. The Rocket, George Stephenson's The Rocket. It could whiz along at 20 to 25 miles an hour. I know, control yourself. Sometimes for as far as 5 or 6 miles. Here's the first one in America, Tom Thumb, and that could whiz at about 15 miles an hour. And then blow up. It didn't work very well, but they would come up with better versions of this down the road. Here is the Rocket. That's at the Train Museum in York, England. And I was just going to take a picture of it, and then this guy walked in right when I snapped it. No idea who that is. But I left him in there because now you can see the size of it. And they would hold extra water here, so they have to stop about every 5 or 10 miles to add more water. Then about every 15 miles to add more fuel. The trains constantly needed water. They blow out the steam, and they have to stop about 15. By 1870, about every 50 miles, they have to stop for water. Every 30 miles, stop for fuel. So they can get up to they can get up to 100 miles an hour by 1890. But then have to stop almost immediately and get more fuel. And they're pretty amazing. What I like is this looks like a carriage, like a horse-drawn carriage. And that's what they did. They just put them on. They just put those. They adapted the wheels so it had to ride on a rail. That's the only reason they did it. They were using rails before. Rails to like pull iron or ore out of mines. They would be pulled by horses. But you could imagine how they're thinking, we got to you use this brand new steam engine to become more efficient. Wouldn't sink in the mud, that's what they used it. Here is one of the first American ones on the B&O Railroad. And I love this because this could go at about 25 miles an hour. You can see the wood and barrel they would use. Coal would be better. And then the carriages are literally horse-drawn carriages that you put different wheels on. And people would first just ride on like it's a carnival ride. They'd ride on top. They get up to 25 miles an hour and not be on a horse, and it just blew them away. They'd be cheering and laughing, and they go for a ride. And the soot would come back and catch their hair on fire, and it's just part of the fun. But once it got over the novelty, ship goods faster and more efficient than ever before. People can move faster than ever before. It would radically change our society. So think about the first train, the B&O Railroad. 13 miles were constructed in 1830. And these are expensive. This can't just be some guy and a hammer going out there and build a railroad. This has got to be an organized, company, a new type of company. It's got to be big enough to build this. But the years we care about, what is really important, is here. 1850, already 9,000 miles. But look what happens by 1860. 22,000 miles of track are going to be built. This will be a radically new world. And by 1860, 3 cents a ton mile. So it's still more expensive than canal, but it's significantly less expensive than road. Trains are significantly less expensive than road today. We just have, in the United States, it's just not very efficient trains. But that is huge. Basically, old world, new world. 1850s, everything changed. All of a sudden, people could get things they never even imagined getting. Those are the key times. And some trains would be adapted for more, pedestrian use. I just thought that was awesome. The adoption of a half cat, half. That's just pretty good. By the way, anyone know what country this is in? Cats represent democracy, but ironically, that's in Russia. So, look at this. Railroads are both transportation and industry. I can't emphasize this enough. So the lines on the map on the left are all the major rail lines in 1850. And look at them. Just a few little connections here. It's kind of important to get this connection here because you take the Erie Canal. I like how the New York Central followed the Erie Canal, but it's already flat. But look at the whole world here. Everything's different. And one more thing, and I want you to add this. Where are most of the rails? What section? The north. Did everyone see that? They're in the north. The country almost had civil war in 1850. That's the world of 1850. Look how much different the world is in 1860. And the factories, the mills necessary for the rails and the trains are the same kind of technology necessary for cannon, the same kind of steel or for iron armored ships. These 10 years would be decisive for the victory of the United States in the Civil War. And that map shows it perfect. Railroads. And still the United States barely won. 1850, US would have lost. So, look at the New World. One day now, all over New England. And that's goods. I'm not talking just transport. They're shipping heavy material. One day from New York, all. Day and a half to Chicago now. The whole world is small. And see all the areas connected by track. By 1880, all the way here. Everything connected. Railroads would change everything. Things you couldn't even imagine buying before. Purchasing, you could buy. I no longer need to make it. I can buy it. Think about how fast that changed everyone's lives. I don't need to make it, I can buy it. Gee, I wonder how long those old skills went away. Yeah, one generation, they're gone. And not just that, you could be here or live here, take the train, New York City, meet new people. You could date people who weren't your cousins. It would radically shift families. I know I'm kind of doing that a little facetiously, but it's true. You won't be like the royal family anymore. You won't be marrying your cousin. Shipping prices halved, and this is the big thing. Shipping prices dropped by 50%. And this is massive government aid. At first, it's going to be the states, but very soon the federal government's going to step in and build. And think about all the new markets now. Markets you could never sell your goods. And not just that, you could build goods in Pittsburgh, build steel in Pittsburgh, ship it to New York or Philadelphia, and soon be selling it in England, or be selling it in Antwerp, be selling it, or go around all the way, be selling it in China. It just changed everything. Not only that, cost dropped dramatically. I don't mean the cost for shipping, cost to produce. if it's cheaper to get goods to market, that means that you can centralize production in one spot, which is more efficient, and therefore your costs drop. And then you don't have to have your factory right next to your fuel supply. You can ship the fuel, coal, to where your factory is to be the most efficient, and then ship the goods to everybody else. Costs begin to drop dramatically. That allowed people who could never afford luxuries like manufactured goods can now buy those. So raw materials to the factories and manufactured goods. I love this graph. It's very generic, I know. But the red line, that is upstream river rates. And it was really expensive for obvious reasons upstream, steamboat. 2, it's gone. There's no difference anymore. And I like canal, Erie Canal. And as railroads became more efficient, you see here, roads remain very high. Still are. And families changed. Families became consumers. You could buy things that you used to have to make. But doesn't that change everything? If you can buy things you used to have to make, you need money. Aren't you more tied to wages than ever before? And if factories shut their door, you starve. Before the Industrial Revolution, even in bad economic times, you were relatively self-sufficient. You might suffer, but you're self-sufficient. After this, in bad economic times, you lose your job, your family starves. If no one's buying products and factories can't sell, so they shut their doors, it ripples through every part of everybody's lives. We are now more connected than ever before. Heck, they were just talking about in Missoula because of cheaper lumber in, let's say, Arkansas and South Carolina. The last two timber mills in Montana are shutting down. That'll be about 400 jobs, and that'll ripple to about 1,000 jobs going to be gone. These are, it's going to really hit it because no one's buying the log, no one's buying the lumber. You can't compete. And think about it for a second. It's not that the people were lazy; they were working their tail off. But if no one's buying the product, you lose your job. And we're consumers now. Everything is different. So, on that note, we got to watch something. A historical video on our saving. I don't know. I didn't want to start. I got to turn the sound off. I showed you guys. It's pretty intense. There we go. There we go. Good question. How did it change? I'll be on the test. I bet. This is about 12 years old, so no, about 7. Here's one. Here's also present. And my favorite one. What happened? Oh no. How did I do that? All right, so that sums it up. That will be on the test. All right. And I'll also let you know if I'll be here on Wednesday. Yeah.
The real question is
I don't know. It's shrouded in mystery. Where were you?
well, we know there was a salamander there. Yes, you are.
Wait.
I'm reading it.
I'm always scared.
I hate time.
I work with that person. Light bulb was
The fact that I can now stack
What's that?
the fact that